I was down in the basement fixing a leaking faucet on the old utility sink the first time I met him. That picture stays with me. I can still see it clear as day. I had a heavy pipe wrench in both hands. I was kneeling on a thick rubber mat, and there was a streak of dark grease smeared across my wrist. I was 62 years old, and I was doing what I had done nearly every morning for the last 19 years. I showed up before most people. I kept my head down. I handled what needed handling, so the place worked the way it should. That was when I heard the elevator doors slide open behind me. Before I even turned around, I heard my daughter's voice. "Dad, we are here," she called out. I set the wrench down on the concrete floor and pushed myself up slowly. My knees are not what they used to be. I reached back and pulled the old shop rag from my back pocket and wiped my hands clean. It is a habit I have had since I was a boy. My own father taught me to wipe my hands before I shook another man's. Back then, I did not fully understand what work meant. I just knew it mattered. My daughter, Allison, was standing in the doorway. Next to her was a man I had never laid eyes on before. He was tall, dressed sharp but relaxed. Early 30s, I figured. Dark sport coat, no necktie. He carried himself like someone who had grown up being told he belonged wherever he stood. He glanced around the basement. The pipes along the ceiling. The shelves stacked with paint cans and spare parts. The water heater humming in the corner. He looked at it all the way people do when they are trying to pretend they are not uncomfortable. "This is Ethan," Allison said. She was smiling, but there was something tight behind it. A careful kind of smile. The kind you give when you are hoping two worlds will fit together and you are not sure they will. I stepped forward and held out my hand. "Thomas Bennett," I said. "It is good to finally meet you." He shook my hand firmly enough, but his eyes drifted past me almost right away, moving over the room like he was cataloging it. "You work here?" he asked. "I do," I told him. He gave a slow nod. Not surprised. "Just storing the information." "Maintenance," he said. It was not really a question. "Yes, sir," I answered. "I have been with the building a long time." He said something polite after that, but it was the kind of polite that does not require attention. Then the moment moved on. Just like that. Allison hugged me before they left. She held on a little longer than usual. Long enough for me to understand she already sensed something she could not quite name yet. After they were gone, I picked up the wrench and went back to the sink. I tightened the fitting. I checked the seal. I finished the job. That is what you do. Before I go any further, I need to tell you something about myself. I want you to understand that the life I built was not something I stumbled into. It was not luck. It was not an accident. It was choice after choice, made slowly over many years. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. My father worked as a machinist in a manufacturing plant. My mother stood behind the counter at a neighborhood bakery on Maple Avenue for 23 years. We were not poor in a way that crushed a family, but we were close enough to it that we never stopped being careful. I watched my parents come home every night worn out in a way that had nothing to do with laziness. It was the tiredness of people who had given honest effort all day long. When they sat down at the kitchen table, there was nothing fake about them. They had no energy left to impress anyone. When I was 31 years old, I started a small property management company. I had saved $11,000 over 8 years. I took out a second mortgage on a house I could barely afford to keep. I would be lying if I told you it was smooth sailing. There were years in my mid-30s when I was not sure we would make it to the next quarter. I used to lie awake at night doing the math over and over in my head until the ceiling above me started to blur. But we made it through. Then we grew. And after a while, the business became something bigger than I had ever pictured. By the time I turned 50, Bennett Property Group owned commercial and residential buildings across 6 states. We had more than 300 full-time employees. The total value of what we held would have made the 31-year-old version of me sit down and take a long, slow breath. And still, I kept showing up in the buildings. Not every single day, not at every single property, but often enough, quietly, without announcements. I would put on work boots and old clothes and spend a morning fixing things right alongside the maintenance crews. In the beginning, I did it because I could not afford enough help. Later, I kept doing it because I learned something important. Buildings talk to you when you are in them. You notice things you never would from behind a desk. You feel when something is off. You hear what tenants really think when they believe you are just another working man. My operations managers knew. My attorneys knew. My staff knew. Allison knew too, though she had never felt completely at ease about it. I understood that. Ethan did not know, and I did not hurry to correct that. Allison and Ethan had been together about 14 months when she brought him to the building that first time. She had told me about him before, of course. She was 30 years old, working as a marketing director at a firm in Chicago. They had met at a conference in Seattle. He was 34, a partner at a commercial real estate advisory company his grandfather had started and his father had grown. Third-generation wealth, the kind that has been around long enough that people treat it like personality instead of circumstance. His full name was Ethan Whitaker. His family owned a brownstone in the city and a lake house up north. Allison mentioned those details with a bright tone that sounded just a little forced. That caught my attention. I do not judge a person based on where they come from. I grew up watching my mother count out coins at the kitchen table to make sure the electric bill could be paid. I know background does not define character. I have met decent, honorable men who had nothing. I have also met difficult men who had everything. The measure I use is simpler. I watch how someone treats the people they believe cannot do a thing for them. That tells me most of what I need to know. That morning in the basement told me something. I did not act on it. I just tucked it away in my mind. Over the next few months, I added more to that file. There was an evening when Allison brought him to my apartment. I keep a modest 2-bedroom place on the north side of the city. Nothing flashy. Nothing that announces itself. Ethan spent nearly 20 minutes talking about a waterfront development he was advising on. He spoke in detail about market timing and investor confidence. But not once during that entire conversation did he ask me a single question. Not about my work. Not about my experience. Not about anything. He knew how to sound engaged without actually being interested. Then there was a Sunday dinner in February. The 4 of us sat at a restaurant downtown. He spoke at length about the city's expansion plans and zoning changes. He clearly knew the numbers. But when the conversation shifted to the construction crews and the trade workers who were actually building those projects, he said something that has stayed with me. Those guys are doing just fine, he said. The unions take care of them. It was not mean. It was not said with anger. It was said with a kind of indifference that had never been examined. Allison changed the subject quickly. I noticed how fast she did it. In March, there was another Saturday at the building. Allison was helping me move old files from a storage unit on the 3rd floor. Ethan came along. He sat in the lobby scrolling through his phone. Not because he had urgent business. It simply did not occur to him that he might lend a hand. I did not say a word to Allison about any of it. She was happy, truly happy. I could see it. And I am her father, not her supervisor. It is not my place to manage her heart. My role is to stand steady and be there when she needs me. Still, I kept paying attention. In April, they announced their engagement. Allison called me on a Thursday night. There was a tremble in her voice, the kind that comes with joy so big it almost feels dangerous. I told her I was happy for her. And I was. I told her I looked forward to knowing Ethan better. I meant that too, in the way a man means something when he still hopes it might become true. The engagement party was set for the end of June. The engagement party was set to take place at the Whitaker family home in an old, tree-lined neighborhood on the north side of the city. I had never seen the house myself, but Allison described it as big. The way she said it told me big was an understatement. She told me there would be around 70 guests. Most of them, she added in a steady but braced tone, would be from Ethan's side of the family. His mother had taken charge of organizing everything. Her name was Patricia Whitaker. I had met her once before, briefly, at that restaurant downtown. She had shaken my hand with a warmth that felt polished. The kind of warmth a person practices in the mirror. I recognized it right away. It was the warmth of someone who decides who you are before you finish introducing yourself. When she took my hand that night, I saw her eyes move quickly. She noticed my suit, clean but simple. She noticed my hands, which have never completely lost the rough feel of real work. Something in her expression settled into place. It stayed there the entire evening. Now, I want to be fair. Patricia was not rude. She was pleasant. Very pleasant. But pleasant can be a performance. I have lived long enough to know the difference between kindness and courtesy. In early June, Allison called me to talk about the seating plan for the party. I could hear the careful tone in her voice. The one she uses when she has rehearsed what she is about to say. She explained that dinner would have assigned seats. The Whitakers had arranged the tables according to what she called natural groupings. Ethan's family, their closest friends, and business associates would sit at the main tables near the front of the room. Other guests would be seated farther back. There was a small pause. My table is near the kitchen, I said gently, saving her from having to finish. She let out a quiet breath. Dad, it is not that I did not try. Allison, I told her, it is fine. I will be there. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I love you. I love you too, I answered. And that was that. I want to be honest about what I felt. I was not hurt in the sharp, breaking kind of way. It was something quieter, harder to name. It was the sadness of watching someone you love bend themselves to fit into a space that does not quite deserve them. Still, I said nothing. I put on a good suit. I shined my shoes. And I showed up. The Whitaker house was exactly what I had imagined. Large brick Georgian. The sort of place that looks permanent, like it has been standing there long enough to believe it belongs. The lawn was cut perfectly. Lanterns lined the walkway. A catering company had taken over the kitchen, and a young man with a clipboard stood by the door checking names. Inside, everything was effortless elegance. White flowers, cream-colored linens, candlelight flickering off polished surfaces. The air smelled faintly of something floral and expensive. Allison met me near the entrance and wrapped her arms around me. She looked beautiful, nervous, but beautiful. I told her so. About 15 minutes later, Ethan came over. He shook my hand and said he was glad I could make it. The way you say you are glad someone could make it when you did not spend much time wondering if they would. His father, Richard Whitaker, followed. He had an easy confidence about him, the kind that comes from never having had to question whether you belong in a room. Thomas, good to see you, he said. I nodded. I did not hold his comfort against him. Very few of us get to choose the conditions that shape our ease in the world. Patricia greeted me by the fireplace. She smiled warmly, but I noticed her attention drifted just past my shoulder as we spoke, scanning the room for someone else more pressing. Eventually, I found my place card. Table 7, near the back, close to the swinging door of the kitchen. At my table sat two of Allison's co-workers from her marketing firm, a retired schoolteacher named Helen who was distantly related to my late wife, and a couple I had never met before who turned out to be former neighbors of Ethan from a condominium he once owned. Helen was sharp-minded and funny. She had strong opinions about the city bus system, and we ended up having a lively conversation about it. I have learned that a good conversation can redeem a poor location. Dinner passed without incident. Then came the speeches. Richard Whitaker spoke first. Warm, long confident. Patricia followed. She was polished and gracious. She praised her son in a way that was loving, though not entirely free of pride in herself. 3 of Ethan's friends took turns with the microphone. They were amusing in that comfortable way men are amusing when everyone in the room already likes them. Then Ethan stood. He thanked his parents. He thanked his friends. He spoke about Allison with a smoothness that surprised me. There was something real in it. I will give him that. Beneath the polish, there was genuine feeling. He talked about the future. Then he said he wanted to recognize the family members who had traveled to be there. He mentioned an aunt who had flown in from out west. He mentioned his grandmother, 91 years old, who had made the trip. He mentioned Allison's mother, my former wife Linda, who was seated at one of the front tables with her husband. He did not mention me. There was a pause. He looked at Allison as if wrapping up a list. And to the rest of Allison's family, he said, "We are grateful you are with us in spirit." That was all. Allison's smile did not falter. She has her mother's ability to hold her expression steady when she must. But I saw her jaw tighten. I have seen that look before. She was 7 years old the first time I saw it, fighting back tears in front of other children. I kept my face calm. I lifted my water glass. Helen shifted slightly in her chair beside me. She did not say a word. After the speeches, people began to move around. The bar opened fully. Laughter grew louder. Ethan made his way over to my table. I do not know if Allison had spoken to him or if he had simply reconsidered. He crouched beside my chair in what I think he meant as a friendly gesture. "Thomas," he said, "really good to have you here." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied. "You know how it is," he went on. "With this many people, seating and lists get complicated." He made a small motion with his hand, as though that explained table 7 by the kitchen door. "Of course," I said. He studied my face for a moment. I gave him nothing to work with. "Allison is lucky," he said finally. "Not every father would just roll with things. You are easygoing. That is a good trait." "I have found it practical," I told him. He laughed. He stood up and gave my shoulder a quick pat, the kind men give when they believe something has been settled. Then he walked back into the center of the room. I drove home that night and sat in my car in the parking garage for a while before going upstairs. I did not cry. I am too old for that sort of reaction. What I felt did not have a simple name. It was not only anger. It was not only disappointment. It felt like a small private loss. I had spent my life building something honest. I had treated people with respect, no matter their position. I had raised my daughter to understand dignity. And I had sat at a table near the kitchen while a man thanked me for being present in spirit. Eventually, I went upstairs. I made myself a cup of tea. I went to bed. The wedding was scheduled for the following September, 14 months away. In those 14 months, I watched carefully. There were dinners at the Whitaker house where I attended but did not quite belong. Conversations about wedding plans flowed around me rather than through me. Decisions were made in front of me that did not require my input. I listened, and I kept paying attention. There was a Sunday brunch in November at the Whitaker house. Patricia was seated across from me at a long table covered in white linen and silver serving trays. She leaned toward me with a pleasant smile and asked, in what I believe was complete sincerity, whether I planned to retire soon. I told her I kept busy. She nodded brightly. That is wonderful, she said. The buildings need good people. Then she turned to speak with someone else, and that was the end of it. In December, Allison and I had a conversation that matters more than most of the others. I want to describe it carefully. We were walking through the park on a Saturday afternoon. The trees were bare, and there was a thin layer of snow on the ground. She brought it up on her own. Dad, she began, I know things have been. I know Ethan's family is a lot. I know it has been. She stopped, took a breath, started again. I see it, she said. I want you to know that I see it. What do you see? I asked her. She was quiet for a while, long enough that I could hear our footsteps in the snow. That they do not, she said slowly. That he sometimes does not. Another pause. You are the best man I know, she said. I need you to know that. I know you love him, I told her. I do, and I know you love me. More than anything. Then I do not need anything to change right now, I said. I just need you to keep your eyes open. She looked at me then. It was a look I recognized right away. She had the same expression when she was 14 years old, standing in the kitchen of our old house, understanding something for the first time that she had been trying not to understand. I did not push her. I let the look settle. We finished the walk in a silence that did not feel heavy. In February of the following year, Bennett Property Group closed on a major development portfolio in the greater metropolitan area. The deal had taken 22 months to negotiate. It was the largest acquisition in the company's history. My chief financial officer, my legal team, and my operations director were in the boardroom when we signed the final documents. Someone opened a bottle of champagne. I had one glass and then set it aside. I have never been a man who lingers too long on celebration. There were media inquiries. A business section article ran in a national paper. My chief operating officer handled most of the public communication. I have always preferred to work without an audience. I was not thinking about Ethan Whitaker during any of this. I want that to be clear. I was not arranging anything. I was not waiting for a moment. I was running my company the way I always had. And I have learned that if you are patient and steady, the world has a way of correcting misunderstandings on its own. What happened next was not something I designed. In March, Ethan's firm, Whitaker Advisory, began early negotiations to secure a large parcel of land for a mixed-use development in the western part of the city. It was the kind of project that required serious equity and partners who were prepared to stay for the long term. One of my development managers brought the opportunity to our regular deal review meeting. The project had come through a broker network without names attached. I reviewed the profile. The land was strong. The numbers were sound. I told my team to move forward with the next phase of due diligence. 3 weeks later, my manager came into my office with a folder. The sellers have confirmed the development partner, she said. She placed the file on my desk. Whitaker Advisory. Richard Whitaker, Senior Advisor. Ethan Whitaker, Managing Partner. I sat back in my chair and looked at the page for a moment. Then I called my attorney. I called my chief financial officer. I told them to proceed as usual. I also told them I would attend the introductory meeting personally. That is not something I often do at that stage, but no one questioned it. My team knows that I choose my moments carefully. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning in April at our offices downtown. We occupy the 24th floor of a clean, modern building. The reception area is simple. I have never cared for offices that try too hard to impress. The boardroom faces south. On a clear day, you can see the lake stretching out in a way that reminds you this city sits beside something bigger than itself. I arrived early, as I always do. I wore what my assistant calls my uniform. Gray suit, white shirt, no tie. I stopped wearing ties years ago. At a certain point, you earn that freedom. I sat at the head of the table with a cup of coffee and reviewed the briefing notes. My team came in. The brokers followed. At 9:12 exactly, Ethan Whitaker walked through the door. He wore a sharp suit and carried a leather portfolio. He was already mid-conversation with one of the brokers, speaking in that easy tone of someone who has walked into many rooms like this and never once doubted he belonged there. He made his way around the table, shaking hands. Then he reached me. He looked at my face. I watched his expression shift through a sequence I have seen many times, though rarely so clearly. First came recognition, the simple human act of placing someone you know. Then confusion, because the context did not match the memory. Because the man he knew from a basement workshop was not supposed to be sitting at the head of a boardroom table on the 24th floor. Then something deeper, a recalibration, a silent adjustment happening in real time, like a compass needle swinging hard before settling. "Thomas," he said. "Ethan," I replied. "Good to see you. Please, have a seat." He sat. My chief operating officer, a woman named Laura who has worked beside me for 16 years, began the formal introductions. She outlined Bennett Property Group's history, our holdings, our philosophy toward development partnerships. She referenced the February acquisition. She detailed our assets under management. She was precise, calm, professional. For her, this was just another Thursday morning meeting. I watched Ethan listen. I watched him absorb the numbers. There is a particular look that crosses a person's face when they realize they have made a deep and confident misjudgment. It is not one expression. It is several in quick succession, each one considering whether to show itself. I have seen that look across negotiation tables many times. It tells you more than words ever will. When Laura finished, I spoke. I discussed the land parcel. I explained what appealed to us, where we saw potential risk, what timeline we would require. I was direct. I am always direct. There is no purpose in circling around a subject you are seated to address. Ethan responded well. He asked intelligent questions. Whatever was happening beneath the surface, he remained composed. He knew his project. He had prepared thoroughly. About 40 minutes in, there was a natural pause. I looked across the table at him. "Ethan," I said, "I think we should acknowledge the obvious. We both know it is there." He nodded. "Of course. I want to be clear," I continued, "that my interest in this project is entirely commercial. The land is strong. The structure has potential. I would like to proceed on that basis. I suggest we leave personal history outside this room." "Absolutely," he said. "Good." We moved on. By the end of the meeting, we agreed to advance to a formal term sheet. It was a solid outcome. The broker looked pleased. When the others gathered their papers and left, Ethan remained seated. I had expected that. "Thomas," he began. "Go ahead," I said. He stopped. For perhaps the first time since I had known him, he was not certain of himself. The confidence that usually arrived with him had not followed so easily into this room. "I did not know," he said finally. "I understand," I answered. She never explained." "No," I said. "She did not." He looked at me. "Why not?" "That," I said, "is a question worth sitting with." He swallowed. "The engagement party," he said. "The way things were arranged." "Ethan," I interrupted gently. "I am going to tell you something I believe to be true. I ask that you hear it as it is meant, not as an attack." He nodded. "The question was never what I owned," I said. "It was never what I built. I have never needed anyone else to know those things in order to be certain of them myself. The question," I told him, "was how you treated a man you believed had nothing." I let that sit between us. The answer to that question told me what I needed to know. I have been watching that answer for more than a year. He did not interrupt. "I truly hope you think about it," I said. "Not for my sake. For Allison's." He picked up his leather folder. "I will," he said. I do not know whether he meant it. I still do not know. What I do know is that I meant what I said. And I said it without anger. That is the only way I know how to say things that matter. Allison called me that evening. Ethan had spoken to her. I do not know his exact words, but something had shifted. When she spoke, her voice carried the sound of someone who had finally set down something heavy. "Why did you not tell me it was his firm?" she asked. "I found out 3 weeks ago," I told her. "I did not think it was mine to manage." "Dad," Allison. She took a breath. He called me tonight, she said. He was not unkind. But he was. She paused. He seemed more concerned about how it looked than about. She did not finish the sentence. He said he felt ambushed. I understand why he might feel that, I said. Do you? Yes, I said. A person who has never examined how they treat people they believe are beneath them will feel ambushed when that examination arrives from the outside. It is uncomfortable. That does not make it unfair. She was quiet. Then she said, I have been making excuses. I know. For a long time. I know that too. I thought if I did not make it into a problem. You thought you could love him enough that it would not matter. Yes. That is a very human thing to believe, I told her. She cried a little then. Not completely. She still carries herself with composure. But enough. I let her cry. After a while, I said, whatever you decide, I will be here. I will not tell you what to decide. I have never done that. I know. You have always had good judgment, I said. You have sometimes chosen not to use it. That is different. She let out a tired laugh. You are very annoying, she said. She has been telling me that since she was about 11 years old. Usually when I have said something she knows is true. We said we loved each other. Then we said goodnight. The deal with Whitaker Advisory did not close. That was not my call alone. Both teams agreed the equity structure did not line up in a way that made sense. That happens. I did not consider it a loss. The wedding did not happen either. Allison ended the engagement in June. She told me herself on a Sunday morning. We met for coffee at a small place we have been going to since she was in college. She was calm. Sad, yes. But it was the quiet sadness of someone who has already grieved before the final goodbye. That kind of grief is easier. I kept waiting for him to surprise me, she said. Did he? I asked. Not in the way I needed. I did not rush to fill the silence. Some spaces deserve to stay open. I thought about what you said, she continued. About keeping my eyes open. I remember. They were open, she said. I just kept choosing to look at something else. That is honest, I told her. I probably learned that from somewhere. We sat outside with our coffee. It was one of those June mornings when the city feels soft and unhurried. People walking dogs. Parents pushing strollers. No one in a rush. I looked at my daughter and thought about every version of her I had known. The little girl with scraped knees. The teenager arguing about curfews. The young woman building her career. All of them leading to this one. She reached across the table and took my hand. You never made me feel foolish, she said. Even at the engagement party. You just showed up. That is the job, I told her. It is more than that. Maybe, I said. But it starts with showing up. I am 64 years old now. I still go into the buildings. Not as often as I used to. My team is strong. They run things well. They do not need me standing over them. But I go often enough. There is something in a man that stays grounded when his hands remain connected to the work that built his life. After a while, it becomes easy to forget that the work itself is the point. Buildings do not care about asset values. They care about plumbing that works, wiring that does not spark, recycling sorted correctly on Tuesdays. I am not telling this story to paint myself as patient or noble. I was patient because I have lived long enough to understand that if you give people time, they will show you exactly who they are. You do not have to force it. You only have to stand still and watch. I was not waiting to expose Ethan Whitaker. I did not arrange what happened. It happened because my company reviews good land. His company brought good land forward. The world is smaller than people think, and it has less tolerance for pretense than people hope. What matters is simpler than any of that. The way you treat someone who cannot do anything for you is the clearest truth you will ever reveal about yourself. It does not matter how confident you look. It does not matter how impressive your resume sounds. It does not matter what you say when you have a microphone. The moment you decide, consciously or not, that the person in front of you is beneath you, and you treat them that way, that moment is the most honest thing about you. It lingers in the room after you leave. My father used to tell me that character is what a man does when he believes no one important is watching. I was too young to fully understand him then. I understand now. I have tried to live by that. Not perfectly. No one lives anything perfectly. But I have tried. I believe Allison will carry that forward. She is already better at it than I am. And I want to say one more thing. I am not angry at Ethan. I am not angry at Patricia. I am not angry about the seating chart or the speech or the hand on my shoulder. What I feel is closer to sadness. Sadness for people who have had so much for so long that they have never been required to discover what they are made of. That discovery comes eventually. It always does. The only question is whether you have prepared yourself for it. Allison is building her life now on her own terms. She bought a 100-year-old half of a duplex in an East End neighborhood. It needs work. She calls me with questions about contractors, foundation inspections, old wiring. I answer the way I answer everything. Directly. Specifically. Without making it harder than it needs to be. Last Saturday, she came by the office to have breakfast with me. I was in the lobby talking with Frank, one of our maintenance supervisors. He has been with us 11 years. His son plays competitive hockey, and I have been following that boy's progress for most of his life. Allison stood nearby and watched us talk. Later, as we walked toward my office, she said, "You know everyone here?" "I have been here a long time," I said. "No," she said. "I mean you actually know them." "They do the work," I told her. "Of course I know them." She was quiet for a moment. "I think I am starting to understand something I should have understood years ago," she said. "What is that?" I asked. "It is not about the buildings." I smiled. "No," I said. "It never was.